Stop eating eggs for breakfast if you think they are the best thing you can do for your muscles after 60. I know that sounds insane coming from someone who spent 30 years in an operating room and a clinic telling patients to eat more protein. But here is what almost nobody tells you. Eggs are good, but there is a food sitting in your grocery store right now, cheaper than eggs, that a landmark study out of Florida State University found may work even better for building and protecting muscle in an aging body. We will get to it in just a few minutes, and when I tell you what it is, you are going to laugh because you probably have it in your refrigerator and have been ignoring it for years. Let me give you the number that changed how I counsel every patient over 60. Researchers tracking muscle loss in aging adults have found that after age 30, we lose somewhere between 3 and 5% of our muscle mass every single decade, and that decline speeds up dramatically after 60. By the time people cross into their 80s, studies show that anywhere from 11 to 50% of them meet the clinical criteria for sarcopenia, which is the medical term for serious function-limiting muscle loss. I will drop every single study I reference in this video down in the description below. So if you want to read the original research yourself or hand it to your doctor at your next appointment, it will all be sitting right there waiting for you. That is not a small statistic. That is millions of people quietly losing the ability to rise from a chair, carry groceries, or catch themselves before a fall, simply because nobody told them their muscles were changing the rules on them. And that brings me to something called anabolic resistance, a term you are going to hear me use throughout this video, so let me explain it simply. Think of your own muscle like a busy delivery warehouse. When you are 25, the warehouse doors fly open the moment a small delivery truck of protein pulls up, and the workers inside immediately start using those materials to build. By the time you are 75, that same warehouse has become stubborn. The doors barely creak open for a small truck. You need a much bigger truck, delivered at the right time, with the right kind of cargo, before the workers inside even bother to start building. That stubborn warehouse is anabolic resistance. And it is the single biggest reason why the protein habits that worked for you at 40 stop working the same way at 70. Before we go further, I want to ask you something, because I read every single comment on these videos, and I mean that literally. Tell me your age in the comments, and tell me one thing you miss doing easily, whether that is gardening without your back giving out, playing on the floor with your grandkids, or carrying your own suitcase through an airport. I want to know exactly who is watching this and what you are fighting for, because that honestly shapes every single video I make after this one. Now let's get into it. I am going to walk you through 5 foods, ranked from good to absolutely essential, that help an aging body build and hold on to muscle. We are counting down from 5 to 1, so stick with me, because number 1 is the food that dethrones the egg, and I promise you it will surprise you. And along the way, I am going to give you the exact timing, the exact portion sizes, and the pairing tricks that turn an ordinary grocery item into something functioning almost like medicine for your muscle tissue. This is not theory pulled from a textbook and never applied. These are the same recommendations I have given patients across 3 decades of practice, refined by watching what actually moved the needle on their strength tests, their walking speed, and their confidence getting out of a chair without using their arms. Number 5 on our countdown list is canned tuna, and I want to start here because so many of my patients dismiss it as boring or old-fashioned. A single can of tuna, roughly 140 grams, delivers around 30 grams of complete protein for less than the cost of a cup of coffee. That protein contains every essential amino acid your muscles need, and it does so with almost no fat and minimal preparation. Here is why this matters specifically for an aging body. Remember our warehouse analogy. Older muscle needs a bigger truck of amino acids to trigger building, and research into the leucine threshold, published in the journal Nutrition and Metabolism, found that while a young adult's muscle fires up protein synthesis with around 1 gram of leucine, an older adult typically needs roughly double that amount, closer to 2 grams, before the same building process switches on. Tuna delivers leucine in a dense, efficient package, which means you get a meaningful trigger without needing an enormous plate of food, something that matters when appetite naturally shrinks with age. My practical advice: choose tuna packed in water rather than oil to control calories, and aim for 1 can as a base for lunch, 3 to 4 times a week. Drain it, mix it with a spoonful of olive oil and lemon, and you have got both a flavor boost and a fat source that helps your body absorb the fat-soluble vitamins hiding in your vegetables. For synergy, pair your tuna with a source of vitamin D, like a few minutes of morning sunlight or a fortified orange juice, because vitamin D receptors sit directly on muscle tissue and help the amino acids you just ate actually get used for repair rather than sitting idle in your bloodstream. I also encourage patients to think about timing this meal around their most active part of the day, whether that is a morning walk or an afternoon errand run, because muscle tissue that has just been asked to work is far more receptive to incoming amino acids than muscle sitting idle on the couch. Pairing activity with protein intake is one of the simplest, cheapest ways to amplify everything else on this list. And tuna, being quick to prepare, fits naturally into a lunch eaten right after a walk. I think of Harold, a retired mechanic from Tulsa, Oklahoma, 71 years old, who came to me exhausted and frustrated that he could no longer lift his own toolbox without his shoulder screaming at him. We swapped his mid-morning snack of crackers for a simple tuna salad, nothing fancy, and paired it with the walking routine we will talk about later. 12 weeks later, his grip strength on our clinic's dynamometer had improved enough that he texted me a photo of himself carrying that same toolbox again, grinning like a teenager. Number 4 is lentils. And I want you to pay attention here, even if you think of lentils as a food for other people, not you. A single cooked cup of lentils provides around 18 grams of protein, and dried lentils analyzed in nutrition research show close to 25 grams of protein per 100 grams, which is a remarkably dense return for one of the cheapest foods on the planet. But protein content is only half of why lentils belong on this list. Lentils are loaded with polyphenols, plant compounds that function like tiny firefighters inside your bloodstream, dampening the chronic low-grade inflammation that researchers now believe actively contributes to muscle breakdown in older adults. This matters enormously for aging bodies because inflammation and anabolic resistance feed each other. Inflammatory signals interfere with the very same mTOR pathway, which you can think of as the master light switch inside your muscle cells that turns on construction that leucine needs to activate. A body simmering with inflammation essentially has a dimmer switch stuck halfway down, no matter how much protein you eat. By calming that inflammation, lentils help that switch flip fully rather than halfway. For preparation, soak dried lentils for a few hours to reduce cooking time and improve digestibility. Then simmer them with turmeric and a bay leaf, which are traditional pairings that also carry their own anti-inflammatory compounds. Aim for a half cup to a full cup 3 or 4 times a week, ideally alongside a grain like brown rice, because combining a legume with a grain rounds out the amino acid profile more completely than either eaten alone. For synergy, add a squeeze of lemon or a side of bell pepper because the vitamin C dramatically improves your absorption of the plant-based iron sitting inside those lentils, and iron is essential for delivering oxygen to working muscle tissue. It is worth mentioning that lentils are also remarkably gentle on the wallet compared to most animal proteins, often costing a fraction of what you would pay for the equivalent grams of protein in meat, which matters enormously for anyone living on a fixed retirement income who still wants to eat in a way that protects their strength. I have had patients tell me they assumed eating well to protect muscle meant spending more money every week at the grocery store, and lentils are usually the food that changes their mind. Before we move to number 3, I need 30 seconds of your time. If this information is new to you, or even if it is confirming something you already suspected, hit subscribe and tap that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people exactly like you, people who are done accepting muscle loss as an inevitable part of getting older. I read every comment, I take requests seriously, and the more this video is shared, the more seniors find their way to information that could keep them independent for another decade. All right, let's get back to it, because the next 3 items on this list are, in my opinion as a clinician, non-negotiable. Number 3 is plain Greek yogurt, and this one deserves more respect than it typically gets. A single 7-ounce container of plain Greek yogurt can carry around 17 to 20 grams of protein, nearly double what you find in regular yogurt, because the manufacturing process strains out much of the liquid whey, concentrating the protein that remains. Here is the part that fascinates me, as someone who has spent years studying gut health in older patients. Aging is associated with a decline in the diversity of bacteria living in your digestive tract, and that decline has been linked to poorer nutrient absorption and higher systemic inflammation, the same inflammation we just discussed with lentils. The live active cultures in Greek yogurt help repopulate that gut environment, which means the protein you eat later in the day gets absorbed more efficiently rather than passing through partially wasted. Think of your gut lining like the loading dock outside our muscle warehouse. If that loading dock is cracked, overrun, and understaffed, it does not matter how much cargo arrives, a huge percentage gets lost before it even reaches the workers inside. A healthy gut microbiome keeps that loading dock running smoothly. For timing, many of my patients get the best results eating Greek yogurt as a mid-afternoon snack, when protein intake for the day often dips lowest, helping to spread amino acids more evenly across 16 waking hours rather than piling most of your protein into dinner, which research on protein distribution suggests is a common and correctable mistake in older adults. For synergy, stir in a tablespoon of ground flaxseed or chia seed, which supplies plant-based omega-3 fats that work alongside the protein to calm inflammation even further, creating a 1-2 punch against the very anabolic resistance we have been discussing this entire video. I also want to mention that the tartness of plain Greek yogurt makes it an easy vehicle for foods you might otherwise struggle to eat enough of, like fresh berries, which bring their own antioxidant compounds to the table. Many of my patients find that once they build this afternoon ritual, they naturally stop reaching for the sugary, low-protein snacks that used to leave them hungry an hour later without giving their muscles anything useful to work with. I remember Dorothy, 78 years old, from a small town outside Asheville, North Carolina, who told me during a visit that she had essentially given up on dessert because of her blood sugar concerns. We built her a small ritual: plain Greek yogurt with berries and a spoon of flaxseed each afternoon, framed not as a diet food, but as a muscle-building ritual. 6 months later, her physical therapist noted she had regained enough quadriceps strength to climb her porch stairs without gripping the railing, something she had quietly stopped being able to do the year before. Number 2 is canned sardines, and I want to be honest with you, this is the item most of my patients wrinkle their nose at before they have ever tasted them prepared properly. A typical can of sardines packs around 23 grams of protein, along with a significant dose of long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, the same EPA and DHA fats found in salmon, but at a fraction of the price. Here is where the science gets genuinely exciting. A randomized controlled trial giving older adults roughly 4 grams per day of fish-derived omega-3 fatty acids found that after 8 weeks, the muscle-building response to a meal measured directly through muscle biopsies roughly tripled compared to those given a placebo oil. Let that sink in for a moment. The same amount of protein, in a body supplemented with omega-3s, triggered nearly 3 times the muscle protein synthesis response. Why does this happen specifically in older bodies? Omega-3 fatty acids get incorporated directly into the membrane of your muscle cells, and researchers believe this changes how sensitively those cells detect and respond to amino acids and insulin, essentially sharpening a signal that has grown blunted with age. There is also a mitochondrial angle here worth mentioning. Mitochondria are the tiny power plants inside every muscle cell, and aging power plants tend to run less efficiently and leak more oxidative stress into surrounding tissue. Studies on fish oil supplementation in older adults have shown it can improve how efficiently those aging power plants function under stress, meaning your muscles are not just building more, they are running cleaner while they do it. For preparation, choose sardines packed in olive oil rather than heavily salted brine. And do not be afraid to eat the small, soft bones. They are an excellent source of calcium, which matters enormously for bone density in a population where fall-related fractures are a genuine threat to independence. Mash them onto whole grain toast with a little mustard, or toss them into a salad, aiming for 2 to 3 servings a week. For synergy, pair sardines with a source of vitamin K, found in leafy greens like kale or spinach, because vitamin K helps direct that calcium into your bones rather than your arteries, giving you a combined muscle and skeletal benefit from one simple pairing. I understand the smell in the tin can put people off, and I am not going to pretend otherwise, but I have watched enough patients get past that initial hesitation once they taste sardines mashed with a little mustard on toast rather than eaten cold straight from the can, that I genuinely believe the resistance is more about presentation than the food itself. Give it 3 tries before you decide it is not for you, because the muscle and bone benefits here are simply too significant to dismiss over texture alone. Which brings us finally to number 1, the food that beats the egg: cottage cheese. I know exactly what you are thinking. Your grandmother ate cottage cheese with canned peaches and called it a diet food. And here I am telling you it might be the single most powerful cheap food for building muscle after 80. Let me explain exactly why, because the research here genuinely surprised me the first time I read it. A study conducted by researchers at Florida State University, published in the British Journal of Nutrition, gave participants 30 grams of protein from either cottage cheese or a casein protein beverage roughly 30 to 60 minutes before sleep. This was one of the first studies to directly compare a whole food against a protein supplement in this context. And it found that cottage cheese performed just as effectively as the purified casein shake at supporting metabolism and muscle recovery overnight. Here is why that overnight window matters so much for an aging body. When you sleep, you enter the longest stretch of time all day without any incoming amino acids. And for years, we assumed older muscle simply broke down passively during those 7 or 8 hours. Casein, which makes up around 80% of the protein in cottage cheese, digests slowly, forming a soft gel in your stomach that releases amino acids steadily for up to 7 hours. Think of it like a slow drip irrigation system for a garden overnight, rather than one giant dump of water at dinner that drains away by midnight. That steady drip means your muscles receive a continuous trickle of building material through the exact hours when they would otherwise be most vulnerable to breakdown. This is precisely why cottage cheese can outperform eggs in this specific context. Eggs are wonderful protein, quickly digested and absorbed within about 90 minutes, which makes them fantastic in the morning when you need a fast trigger to break an overnight fast. But that speed is a liability at bedtime, because a fast in-and-out protein does nothing to protect your muscle during the long overnight stretch. Cottage cheese, by contrast, is built for exactly that slow overnight job, which is why, for the specific goal of preserving and building muscle around the clock, especially in a body already fighting anabolic resistance, it earns the top spot on this list. For practical use, aim for a half cup to 1 cup of low-sodium cottage cheese, roughly 20 to 30 grams of protein, consumed 30 to 60 minutes before bed. If the texture bothers you, blend it smooth with a splash of vanilla and cinnamon, and it becomes almost indistinguishable from a pudding. For synergy, pair your nightly cottage cheese with a small handful of walnuts or a drizzle of flaxseed oil, because the added fat slows gastric emptying even further, stretching that amino acid drip out even longer through the night, and gives you another small dose of the same anti-inflammatory omega-3s we discussed with sardines. I want to be clear that this does not mean you should stop eating eggs altogether, because a well-made omelet in the morning is still an excellent way to break an overnight fast quickly and start your day with a strong anabolic signal. The real insight here is that your body has different needs at different hours, and the smartest approach uses a fast-digesting protein like eggs to open the day, and a slow-digesting protein like cottage cheese to close it, covering the full 24-hour cycle rather than leaving that long overnight stretch undefended. I want to tell you about Miriam, an 82-year-old retired school teacher living just outside Sacramento, California, who came to see me after a fall in her kitchen left her badly shaken, though thankfully unbroken. She had been eating almost no protein at dinner for years, mostly out of habit and a diminished appetite in the evenings. We added a modest bedtime bowl of cottage cheese with a few walnuts, nothing dramatic, alongside twice-weekly resistance exercises with light bands. 4 months later, her physical therapist measured a genuine improvement in her single-leg stance time, the exact measure that predicts fall risk in someone her age. She told me with tears in her eyes that she felt steady on her feet again for the first time in years, and that steadiness meant she could keep living alone in the home she and her late husband had shared for 4 decades. I want to be honest with you about something before we close, because I think seniors get lied to constantly by an industry selling miracle powders and expensive supplements. None of these 5 foods are magic. Cottage cheese will not rebuild a torso of muscle by itself, and neither will sardines or lentils. What actually works, and what the research consistently shows works, is combining these smart, cheap protein sources with regular resistance activity, even something as gentle as bands, bodyweight movements, or a daily walk carrying light weights. The food gives your body the raw materials and the right signal at the right time, but movement is what tells your body those materials are actually needed. Do both together, consistently, and even a body in its 70s, 80s, or beyond can respond to that signal in a genuinely meaningful way. I think often of a small study I read years ago that stayed with me, showing that older adults who combined a higher protein intake with even modest resistance exercise 2 or 3 times a week saw measurably greater gains in muscle strength than those who changed only their diet or only their exercise habits alone. The combination did something neither piece could do by itself. That is the entire philosophy behind everything I have shared with you today. A can of sardines sitting in your pantry is not going to rebuild your quadriceps if it never meets a reason to be used. But paired with a short daily walk, a few sets of chair stands, or a resistance band you keep looped around your kitchen doorknob, that same can of sardines becomes part of a system that is quietly, steadily rebuilding you from the inside out. Here's what I want to leave you with. Muscle is not vanity. Muscle is not about how you look in a mirror or fitting into old clothes. Muscle is the difference between getting up off the floor after a fall by yourself or waiting helplessly for someone to find you. Muscle is being able to carry your own groceries, hold your grandchild without your arms shaking, and walk into your own home without a walker you never wanted. Independence, at its core, is a physical thing, built cell by cell, meal by meal, and it is genuinely never too late to start building it back. I have watched patients in their 80s and even their 90s respond to these exact changes with measurable improvements in strength and function within months, not years. I think about Miriam again here, because when she first sat across from me after her fall, she used the word afraid more than once. Afraid of her own kitchen, afraid of being a burden to her children, afraid that the version of her life where she lived independently was quietly ending without her permission. 4 months later, that fear had genuinely loosened its grip, not because of some dramatic transformation, but because of a bowl of cottage cheese eaten most nights before bed and a few resistance bands used a couple times a week. That is the quiet, undramatic truth about aging well. It rarely arrives as a single miracle moment. It arrives as dozens of small, boring, repeated choices that compound over months into something that feels, from the outside, like getting your life back. Your body has not given up on you, even if it feels that way some mornings when your knees are stiff and the stairs look a little steeper than they used to. It is simply waiting for the right signal, delivered consistently, and now you know exactly what that signal looks like on a plate. You do not need a gym membership you will never use, an expensive supplement cabinet, or a complicated meal plan to start protecting the muscle that keeps you independent. You need a can of tuna, a bag of dried lentils, a tub of plain yogurt, a tin of sardines, and a container of cottage cheese, all of which you can likely find at your regular grocery store this week for less than the cost of one restaurant meal. If this video helped you, do me a favor and subscribe, because I have more of these breakdowns coming, and I genuinely want you to see them. And before you go, answer me honestly in the comments. Which of these 5 foods are you most surprised by, and which one are you going to try adding to your plate this week? I will be reading every single answer, and I will see you in the next video.